Okay, all right, folks. So let's start with very basic, because still another 3 lectures will be on the basics and then we'll get into CPU design. Okay, so let's look at all these topics, which is what is in a computer, what is, then we'll read little bit about memory, main concepts, and then we will, go into more details. And then we'll have second lecture on von Neumann architecture. So this is what our computer is, right? I mean, this is a level which gives an interface to software world, right? So we have hardware inside. Okay, we have components, circuits, transistor, and so on. On top, we have OS. Architecture is the architecture that programmer views. Okay, a part of hardware that's visible to programmer. Okay, and then we have OS. We have, on top of OS, we have various tools, right, or platforms like programming languages, and using programming language you can write program. So as we go up, from bottom to top, the abstraction level goes up, and we have studied this. As we go reach more higher level, then we don't need to know something that's below that, right? A programmer need not know anything about what goes on in hardware. And similarly, application writer needs to know only very little, right? So an application user in fact needs to know nothing excepting how to open application, how to use the application. All right, so all these things, but think deeply about these concepts, because sometimes what we think is not correct. Okay, all right. So to get work done by any computer, we need, of course, something that computes. Okay, the purpose of computer is nothing but to compute. Okay, then we need data, and we need set of instructions or program. Okay, these are three necessary things, right? Set of instructions tell what is to be done, which is user defined, and then these instructions are meaningless until you work on some data items. Okay, and as a result of that you get the output, and all these things, data manipulation is done by computer. All right, and the program is nothing but set of instruction is smallest piece of work in a computer, which is user defined. Okay, even if you look at a machine instruction, one machine instruction can do a lot. Actually, a lot of things happen within a machine instruction. Okay, so we cannot say at all levels the smallest piece of work, but instruction execution also requires, a lot of control signal generation and application of those control signals for data manipulation and data movement. Okay, so we'll come to those aspects little later. So we need computation, that's first. And in now computer is not just a single piece, right? It has multiple components. So we need to communicate across these components using some mechanism, and what we use in general is bus. And there are computers which don't use bus, which use some kind of interconnect networks, right? uh, okay, and then third thing that's important is storage and memory. Okay, so now this is a diagram. We have computing unit, but data to computing unit or instruction to computing unit comes from memory, right, through a communication unit. So instruction and memory come from this memory or storage unit. Okay, and then data again comes from here, and finally data goes back to memory or storage unit, or it may also go to IO unit. Okay, so this is normally what happens, right? So you get data generally is there in memory. Memory is, we have seen are two types, volatile and non-volatile. Okay, non-volatile memory we usually call storage, because it's in bulk, right, like hard disk drive or tape drive, right? So storage generally we word associate with hard disk drive or tape drive. Okay, or we can say flash memory also in some sense now. uh, okay, and the memory is usually is RAM, random access memory, SRAM and DRAM in general, right? So of course technologies keep coming. All right, so now let's look at computer in the following way. We have a processor which does processing. Okay, and it has two parts. One is control path, second is data path part. Okay, now control path is something which controls the whole, both execution of single instruction and also multiple instructions, right? It means that it controls the execution of the whole program or set of instructions or within an instruction. Okay, so within an instruction, how actually data moves or data gets manipulated. In order to do those actions or sub operations, it generates some control signals. And second is the data path, where actually data movement happens, right? For example, registers. Data can move from a register to ALU. Okay, so or ALU to memory, right? So all these are part of data path. Okay, wherein actual data movement happens from where data is stored permanently or temporarily. Okay, say register may contain data temporarily. Okay, and then from register it can go to say ALU, where actual operation, say addition of two numbers can happen, and final result can come to register. From there it can go to memory, right? So all these are part of data path. Also, something that's part of data path is the buses on which data moves within a processor. Okay, and that in order to get instruction or data, its processor is connected to memory. Okay, and then of course it's connected also to IO. So this is general structure. How these are interconnected is totally different. What we have shown is logical diagram, right? How whether processor can directly do IO or it goes through memory is all detailed, right? In general, these three components are interconnected. All right, any question?
No, sir.
All right. Data path, as we said, is a collection of state element. The word state is nothing but wherever you use flip flop or buffer, we call it state, where state of system can be stored, or a state of a system, a computer is generally defined in terms of state of its state element, which is registers. Okay, uh, combination logic thing does not define a state. That's the reason when you study sequential combination logic, you would have studied that. Note that we always, whole idea of computing, the way we compute in general in computers, is that we change state of the system. Okay, and who changes the state? It's the instruction that we are executing. So it's before execution of instruction, there is some state. Okay, it's nothing but values, various values in various registers, etc. Okay, and after execution, again state changes. All right, of course, you can always argue that there are some instruction which does not change, say like an NOP, etc. But in general, in order to do something meaningful, we need instructions, and instructions change the state of a computer, and that state is in general defined by state element, which is flip flops. Okay, there are some others, we'll see that later. And then apart from flip flops or registers, we have also computational elements like some adders, some and then ALU operation. Within ALU you can have multiplier, adder, or whatever. Okay, and interconnection of all these together provide a conduit for flow and transformation of data in a processor during execution. So execution of an instruction is not just very simple thing, but it requires data manipulation from various parts of computer and manipulation. Okay, or actually or execution of, say for example, addition or subtraction or some arithmetic logical operation. Okay, so you will see the data path is register file, ALU, buses, memories, buffer, headers, etc. All right. Okay, and then let's come to memory. Memory stores just two things: data and program. Okay, and memory is of two types. You would have learned it by now: volatile memory and non-volatile memory. Okay, volatile is something where if there is no power, then the whole information is lost. Okay, like random access memory or dynamic, SRAM or DRAM. Uh, Random access memory in general is, we can say, is a volatile memory. Now we call it random access. You would have studied in digital electronics course, because accessing each location takes almost the same time. Okay, the non-volatile memory, of course, we have studied, like we have hard disk, magnetic tape, optical disk, floppy disk, read-only memory, ROM memory, which is semiconductor memory, flash memory, which is again semiconductor memory, and all that, right? All right. So this we know. Okay. So what we studied now, there are two kinds of memory: volatile and non-volatile. Okay, and memory stores data and program. And then we have various attributes associated with memory. One important attribute is access time. How much time it takes to read a unit of data. Okay, uh, and we have seen the analogy in one of the lectures. Okay, so SRAM, which is closest to processor, static RAM, is actually a cache memory. Then we have DRAM. So access time for SRAM is a magnitude faster than that of DRAM. Then it's faster than flash, and the flash access time is slower than a hard disk, and then magnetic tape, and so on. Capacity wise is reverse, right? Magnetic tape has highest capacity, then hard disk drive, then flash memory, then DRAM and SRAM. Cost wise, something which is fastest will be most expensive, right? So SRAM is most expensive, then DRAM, then flash and hard disk. Okay, so now processor executes at gigahertz speed. Okay, and time available for in one clock cycle is very small. Then, if the fastest memory must be kept closer to the processor, such that access time is less. But the faster memory is generally slow, is small in size, right? So we solve this problem in the following way: we create memory hierarchy. Okay, this is a processor that works at very fast speed, and then we need to access something which is data from or program from something which is very fast. Otherwise processor will keep waiting for data to come from memory. Okay, now something that is very fast like SRAM is expensive. Okay, now second thing is that if even if we can say afford to have more expenses, and we think of having SRAM of larger size, that's also not very good option, because as we increase the size of SRAM, although it's a fast technology, as we increase the size, there are delays. Okay, so the SRAM has to be properly proportioned, in the sense that it is very fast, and one reason it's very fast is also that not only technology is faster, but also is smaller in size. However, the program execution may require huge amount of data and code. So what we do is that we create hierarchy, and we keep slightly slower memory but higher in capacity. Okay, and then put another one, and so on. This is the fastest one. This is, sorry, slowest but largest. Now we take advantage of locality in the sense that most of the program runs only in part of it, runs, uses only part of the code. Okay, it's when you're running, we can say very much if there is a for loop or while do loop, then until the loop is over, it will just run across this whatever 8, 10, or 20 lines within the loop, right? So there is a locality. It's very similar to, what you do is that, for example, you use library, and you plan to spend, significant time in the library because exams are there. And what do you need? The whole library is available to you, but you go and pick up 3, 4 books, whatever is capacity available on your desk, right? You maybe pick 6 books, and then most of the time you use that. And if you need more books, then what you do is replace one book back to the rack and bring new book, right? So similarly, so in that case you have access to the whole library, but most of the time you are using what you need. So exactly what we do in memory hierarchy is that we bring the data as we need towards the highest memory or the fastest memory. Okay, and so, and whatever we don't need, we move it down. Okay, so in this way, most of the time you have hit. When a processor needs something, most of the time it will have a hit in cache, or if not in cache, in main memory. Okay, in that case, processor gets data at very fast speed while you have capacity of this size available. All right. Okay. Any question into this one about this? Any question about this memory hierarchy concept?
Sir, if we have multiple of the smallest memories together,
Yeah.
then will that help in any manner?
How will it help? See, what you can do is that you can. You mean to say that, okay, I understand what you are trying to say, because I said that this memory cannot be large in size, right? So instead of one, you can have
Yes, sir.
multiple. Not that is what we do is that we associate, kind of personal cache level one memory with each processor, but we are not going to do that multiple of these with each processor because of design constraint. Because, of course, I mean, there are other issues, right? I mean, see, note that you are working here at nano speed. Okay, there's hardly any time. Now if you have multiple of these small, then it may take few nanoseconds by itself in making decision where to route or something like that. Okay, so when we study cache, we will see that how to fine tune this such that the hit ratio is very high. Okay, so what you are asking actually design issue, right? I mean, can a processor access to multiple parallel uh, cache memories, which is very fast? I have not seen any design so far. Of course, what we have is multiple processor using their independent caches. Level 1 and level 2 are uh, kind of processor centric, and level 3 is shared across multiple processors. That's what the structure is. Okay. All right.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Right. Let's move ahead. So memory is, when we see memory, we'll have to see is nothing but array of bytes. Okay, a byte is nothing but 8 bits. Okay, or you can see is say the first byte, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and so on. You'll have to view it in a, it's an array of bytes. Okay, and now bytes are grouped into a word. So note that different computers have different word sizes. Okay, we'll in the next slide we'll study what is a word. Okay, and it's very misnomer term. I mean, because it means something 10 years back, it means something else. But in general, each processor defines what is the word size, and there can be multiple word size also. Okay, so let's restrict our understanding to one word size for a machine. So we can say that a machine, or one architecture, not really a machine. Let's assume, say that a machine has, say, 32-bit word. Okay, so we will study RISC-V. that has 32-bit word. It means that one word it consists of 4 bytes. Okay. Now, when we use a word, okay, usually what happens, I mean, I will not say it's always, right? That one word is manipulated. It means that when you use ALU, arithmetic logic unit, and do summation of two numbers, these are all say one word size or 32-bit size. Okay. Earlier we used to say that it's, see, if it's 32, then we can access 2 raised power 32 locations in memory. It means that memory address register size is 32, which is not no longer true. Okay, Intel processor in fact is 64 bits. They call it 64-bit processor, but it has 2 raised power 48 memory locations which it can address. Okay, so when we say word in general, think you can, different books of course have different notations, but in general you'll have to think in terms of the size of registers. Size of register is what ALUs usually use, right? So that's all. Otherwise, write explicitly or read very clearly what is the register size, what is memory size. Okay, so most of the machines, like RISC-V is 32-bit. It has 32-bit word. It means each register is of size 32, and also it can access 2 raised power 32 locations in memory. But second thing is not necessarily true for all processors. Okay, so then we and in literature also you'll find different things. I mean, like word size refers to number of bits processed by computer CPU in one go, or ALU in one go. Okay, its nominal size of integer value data and of address. Now address is of course is question mark. All right. So typical word sizes are 1 byte, 2 bytes, 4 bytes and 8 bytes. All right. So most of the processes that we are nowadays coming out, like Intel's latest processor or latest RISC processor, is all 64 bytes. Okay. All right. Okay. Any question? No.
No, sir.
All right. Second thing is that, so we have defined word size. So word size for RISC processor is 32 bits. So this is a memory. Okay. Of course, I mean, the first byte, second, third byte, and so on. There are 8 bits in each byte. Huh? Now, question is that when we have word size is 32, what is the minimum amount of bytes that we can read? What is the minimum number of bytes we can read at a time from memory? Okay. So now you can say that if there are 4 bytes, then we can, let's read all 4 bytes in a one shot parallelly. Okay, so data will come out will be 4 bytes. So if memory is structured in this way, then we call it word addressable. Okay, earlier computers were word addressable, but later on people found that programmers most often manipulate a byte. Okay, so now later architectures became byte addressable. Now word size could be anything, because the word size means the manipulation is happening, register size is something and manipulation is happening something. So but reading of from the memory, the minimum amount of data that you can read is a byte, which is 1 byte we can read is called byte addressable. Okay, now that doesn't mean addressing is corresponding to byte. So we'll have, say, first location will be 0000, second location will be 0001, third location like this is 0010, and so on. Okay, had it been byte word addressable, then first location is of course 0000, but second location after 4 bytes will be 0001. All right. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So RISC-V is byte addressable. It means that although word size may be 32, but we are minimum data that we can read is 1 byte. Each address of the location is corresponding to a byte. That's it. Okay, and there are instructions like load word, LW. It means that word is of course 4 byte. So, but we are going to read 4 bytes together, but the address of the first word would be 0000, and then we want to read second word like load word, then we'll have 0004 and so on. So increase will be like this, but minimum addressable thing is 1 byte. Okay, all right. And then something that's which will come very often is called address space. How many such locations in memory, if this is a linear memory, and minimum addressable thing, let's assume, is 1 byte addressable, how many such locations we can address? How can such location can be there which we can read in the memory is nothing but what is how many addresses are allowed to be read in the memory, right? So it's usually in machines like RISC is to refer 32 because address size is of 32 bits. Okay, address size that we define is of 32 bit in RISC-V. However, in Intel it is 48 bits. So in that case we can read up to 2 raised power 48. Also there are some machines we can read up to 2 raised power 64. All right. Okay. So is it clear?
Sir, could you please tell byte addressable and word addressable again?
Okay, that's okay. Let's come here, right? Second slide, and then we'll come back if you don't understand. So byte addressable is that each byte will have an address. Okay, so this memory that we see here is word addressable. It means that first word, minimum amount of data that can you address and that has an address is 4 bytes. Okay, so let's remove this thing that's shown in between. So essentially it is like this. First address will be 0000. Okay, and it has okay, and the second address will be 0001. Third address will be 0010. And inside this could be anything. Now you define it has 32 bit word, it means 32 bits will be there. Okay, so what do you get? Now this is the address. So when you want to read the first word, you give this address at the beginning. Okay, and read all this, which is 32 bits. If you want to read the second word, you give the second address, which is 0001, and read this. Okay, so basically if here in this example we are clubbing is one word size 32 bits, and is a word addressable means that address we are addressing each word, not each byte. Okay, there may be 4 bytes in the word, we are not bothered about it. The address will be only that of the word which is the beginning of the word. Okay, so here 0000, this is 0001 and so on. Okay, all right. So now we have second thing is byte addressable memory. It means that each byte of the memory has an address. Okay, so here suppose you want to fetch 1 byte. So first byte its address is 0000. You just read this because you can read this. Okay, now you want to read second byte, then your address will be 0001. we read the second one, and so on. This way you can read. But suppose you want to read a word, because it's not very efficient to read a byte. You may want to read a word, because note that register is a word size and your manipulation is also word size. Although you can read, although memory system allows you to read each byte, but you may want, most of the operation will require 4 bytes at a time. So what you can do is that you can read 4 bytes together, which are starting at byte address of 0004. Okay, now you want to read the second word, then in earlier case there was address 0001 here, if you note. But here, since a byte addressable, it's a second word is starting from address 0004 and so on, right? So you may ask that why it is so, because reason is again the same, that earlier minimum manipulation that people thought is a word, and even if you have to extract a byte of it, you will read all 4 bytes, and then do some operation in ALU to extract some byte out of it, right, out of 4 bytes. Okay, that was a method, but that was inefficient, because it will require another operation just to read a byte. But the simple thing is that you can, if you want, you can read a byte, but there are instruction to read a byte, there are instruction to read a word, but the memory is byte addressable. If you read a word, then of course the next word will be 4 bytes away. That's it, as simple as that, right? So is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's take another example. Okay, now consider byte addressable memory, means each byte will have an address. Okay, like this. So this is byte address. This is 0th byte, first byte, second byte, third byte, and so on. Okay, but word size for me, say in RISC, is 32 bits, right? So now what will happen? What is address of the first word? Suppose I want to take first word, second word, third word out, because these are the instruction is also 32 bits. So I want to read, say, 3 instructions. So first instruction is here, second instruction is here, third instruction is here. So what is address of the first word? Note that it's a byte addressable. Anyone? What is address of the first word? 0000. What is the address? Is actually starting address of the starting byte. That's it. What is the address of second word? Is 0004. Okay, so because there is a 0 first, second, third byte, this is fourth byte. What is the address of this one? 0th first second word is 0008. Now think of the word is memory is although byte addressable, but we want to read words, because processor word address, basically manipulating word. The word size 64, then address of first word will be 0000, but address of second word will be after 64 bits. Okay, so it will be 0008. So this address of this, which is 0008, and so on. All right, so that's the concept. All right, is it clear? Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's look at another concept, which is called big endian versus little endian. I am sure you would have read this in somewhere or other. Okay, so this name comes from Gulliver's Travels. I mean, I'm sure you would have read this book, right? So there are 2 ways to breaking an egg. Little endians broke the egg from little side. Okay, the big endian people broke the egg from big end of the egg. Okay, which is better? Anyone?
So, Little Indian.
Hmm? Or break it from the middle?
Already have enough war on this topic in Gulliver's.
All right. So there is nothing. Both are same, right? Doesn't matter. Where do you break it from? All right. So similarly, within a word, okay, we have seen that word is of 4 bytes. Okay, and then let's assume that memory end is a byte addressable. So starting from 0, 0, 0, 0, this is 0, 0, 0, 1, and so on. So the question is that now you have 4 byte word. Say for example 0x, 0x stands hex, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this is, what is this? So if you okay, write it down in terms of binary, so it will be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 0, 1, 0, 0. So these are the bytes which will be here. Now the question is which one you are going to put where? Now one way of thinking is that this is the least significant bit and this is smallest address. Put 0, 1, 0, 0 here. And the second one is 0, 0, 1, 1 here. And third one is 0, 0, 1, 0 here. And then MSB will be starting at highest address, which is 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay. This is one way. Second is that same thing, you know, what you can do is that you can put the MSB here, because this is how we normally read, right? So all the address starting it's from 0. So you'll put 0, 0, 0, 1 here, 0, 0, 1, 0 here, 0, 0, 1, 1 here, and 0, 1, 0, 0 here. So order in which you put different bytes of the word, whether most significant byte is starting as lowest address or least significant byte is starting at from the lowest address, is the difference. Okay, so that's, so we call it big endian if least significant byte is the highest address. Highest is means it's towards this. Okay, if starting, suppose it's starting from this one and going this side, so it's, so big endian, let's look at this word 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 1 byte, second byte, third byte, 4 byte, 32 bits, right? This is the least significant part of the word, right? The 67. Now where this 67 will go? According to big endian, least significant byte has the highest address. It means that this is 67, so it will go to the highest address. And all right. And then MSB is at the lowest address. So 0, 1 will come here. This is the lowest address. And you reverse this, okay, then you have little endian, right? So little endian says the least significant byte will be least, the smallest address, right? So so if what we'll have 67 here, then 45, then what is the next one, 23, and 0, 1. It means then if you see 0, 1 is most significant byte at, and then it says it's a higher address in little endian. Okay, now if you just read it, then this looks more natural than this one. Okay, because we are writing it this way, I mean 0, but it different computers use in different way. There is, nobody can say what is good and what is not good. Now when I will give you numericals, there will be some numericals that will be in our assignment. You'll have to think where these bytes will come. Okay, and note that each location is of that of a byte. That's it. Within a byte, you are not changing the bit positions. Byte remains byte. Byte is a atomic. You can think of atomic. That is a, suppose it's 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0. It remains as it is. You cannot change the order of. Okay. All right. Any question?
Sir, if reading a word is more efficient than reading a byte, then why are we limited to only 4 bytes? Why we represent words by 4 bytes?
Oh, very good question. You can always have, but that will require you to read 64 See, it's all optimization that you are doing. If you are reading 64 bits, then you have to have buses of 64 bit size, right, which can take all the data in one cycle. Also, you have to have different registers of size 64. Okay, and then you have to manipulate on these numbers. ALU size has to be 64, right? So of course, I mean, what you say is correct. I mean, in the beginning, it was only 8 bit, 1 byte processors. Then it became 16, then 32 and 64. Okay. So now you will have to really see the cost benefit analysis and how much complexity is going to generate. Okay, whether you are going to use all 64 bits at one time or not, all these things you need to see, and based on that you need to design a processor. Nobody stops you from designing 128 bit processor, which not many companies have designed. I don't know if really it's in use. Okay, but reading things parallelly, of course, is 128 bytes in one cycle. You can read it, or whatever, same time is beneficial, but you'll have to see how to change the register size. Is really good, not good. Are you doing 128 byte calculation most of the time or not? That again you will have to see, and based on the optimization you can always design. But in general, technology is moving from less word size to higher word size. Okay, all
Okay,
right,
sir.
good question. Yeah.
If there is no advantage of using any one method over the other, like big endian and little endian,
Mm-hmm.
then why do we still use two? Why not just use one for all?
Okay, that's the individual choice. Some companies have started one way, some have started other way, and they don't want to change. But only issue is when you want to interchange data between the two. Now, one question that you can think of is that in internet, what is done? Because it connects various machines. When machines exchange with each other, where this data conversion has to happen. So little Indian machine is converting to big Indian machine, the data conversion has to happen. But to answer your question, it is a choice of different companies, and still, since there is a solution of changing one to another, so nobody is really working towards this one method. But idea, if that is so, it will be best. Okay, so this exactly answers this question. It's just a convention. Okay, um, the only problem, as we said, is when they have to share the data, nothing else. All right, so let's come to the next part. How do we interconnect these different components of a system? With this part we have already studied in brief. What we do is that we use buses. Okay, and buses are, note that buses are not dedicated buses between any two components, right? I mean, see, otherwise it will be a fully connected network. Okay, suppose there are 4 or 5 such components, let's assume these 5, then you need to create fully connected network if everyone has to have connection with other. Okay, so you require very large number of links. It's a fully connected graph, right? You know how many links are there, and its number of components go up, then this complexity becomes just too big, right? That's the reason we use shared mechanism. Buses are shared among number of components. Okay, and when only 2 components can communicate with each other, when there is a unicast, it's a one is device is communicating to any other device, then it's called unicast, right? Then we can use uh, only 2 can use a bus, right? Like this. At this point in time, this guy is not using the bus, and this guy is also not using the bus. Okay, when term of this is over, this guy can use the bus, and so on, right? So it's a shared mechanism. If it's a shared mechanism, then there has to be a protocol or set of rules about how to share the bus. Okay, so bus comes with set of rules. All right, and it's nothing but we can think of parallel lines. Okay, data lines, for example, it could be usually is a word size. Okay, so it, in this, for example, data size, number of data lines will be 32. Now address lines are essentially which carry the address bits. So if the memory has 2 raised power 64 locations, okay, then this is likely to be 64, but nobody strongly can always say that it will be 60. It can be 32, but it will take 2 cycles to carry the addresses, right? So usually it is 32. For example, is 32 bit processor, it's usually 32 bit. Now apart from these two, there is something called control lines which carry control signals. Control signals are required. When you have done digital circuit design, then when you are writing into memory, then there's something called write enable signal that is to be enabled, right? Otherwise, if until this signal is available, whatever is available input cannot be written. Otherwise, there is always zeros or some junk values there at the input that will also get written. So control lines carry the control signals, like as we said, memory control. Or for example, in ALU, we'll have to perform different operations. We have to do addition, subtraction, and so on. And each operation correspond to a control signal, and these control lines will carry those control signals. Okay, all right. Any question? Is it absolutely clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Why can't we use one line for both data and address? Like in one cycle, take data, another cycle, take address.
Very good question. Now that's what the design 20 years, 30 years back. Then processor has to wait. So what we are trying to do is some sense reducing the time. We carry the signals together. So what you say is right. I mean, we can use one bus for all 3 activities, but then there will be time lag, right? First you'll have to transmit what? Address, then it will get stored in some register, then you'll have to have data, it will get stored in register, and then control. When control signal comes, then you can write. So essentially you take 3 times more time. Okay, so see, it's all again question of how do you design. You can always design the way you want, but normally this is the way that these 3 lines are different. All right, good. Okay, so this is the diagram you'll see very often. These are the bus, like PCI bus. We also studied this in last class. And these are the internal memory and system buses. Fine. All right. This small trivia. Okay. This is about the motivation for big data. Okay, so the amount of data initially just 20 years back, 10 years back was very, very little. And there is an exponential growth. Okay, and here the amount of data we are generating is more than number of stars in the universe. The huge amount of data. The question is, how do we then manipulate this, right? Okay, and this is where digital transformation of business comes. When data becomes a central, then you can transform any business. Okay, because everything is becoming smart, every device is becoming smart. We will study IoT as one of the lectures. Okay, and the internet is pervasive, computing is pervasive, it's very cheap, both are very cheap. So every device will have both computing and internet connectivity, and more data will continue to get accumulated, right? So, and then these digital technologies are becoming very popular, right? Every day you read a newspaper, you will find some article on how digital technologies are changing the world, right? And it has changed the world for us. Otherwise, this 10 years back, this kind of class won't have been possible. All right. So, and the businesses that are not adopting digital technologies are dying. Okay. The question is to you is that look at these companies. Kodak. I'm sure your father would have used Kodak camera that has photo film. I have started my photography, learn photography when I was child using a camera which was basically a Kodak camera. Actually, it was prior to Kodak. It's called Rolleiflex, but it had photo film. Then Polaroid Corporation came with a technology wherein, you know, the photo film can be, normally method is that take the, you know, usually 12 snaps used to come earlier. So 12 films you expose, take it to a lab, and then, you know, they will process it, give you print. Polaroid came up with a brilliant idea that, you know, you can see the photo immediately. Okay, and then there was a company called Blockbuster Inc., which is video rental company, which used to, I mean, up 30 years back, possibly you're, I don't know, you were not even born. Then we used to go to, if I have to watch a movie, I will go to a movie rental shop and take a cassettes, video cassette, right, and see. So Blockbuster Inc. was, they used to send these video cassettes by mail or something like that. Okay, and then the Borders Group was a bookstore business. So what is common among all this? Anybody? Where is Kodak company now? It was a leading company, the best company some 30 years back. Polaroid was another premier company. They are all dead because they didn't adopt to digital technologies. And if any of you is having a business, your father is doing, say, some business, say some, let's assume one of my relative is doing kirana shop. Okay, it's very likely another 10 years, if he does not adopt to digital technologies, then business will be over. Okay, like, I mean, nowadays we don't go to kirana shop. I have not gone to kirana shop for last 2 years or 3 years, right? Everything is online. So see, the way photography is one example. The way photography market has changed is tremendous, right? The all the style companies, if they have not adopted to digital technologies, they are all dead. So my favorite camera is Nikon, and of course Canon is another good camera, and both have adopted to digital technologies, and they could survive, but they are still not the largest manufacturer of the camera. Who is the largest manufacturer of the camera? Can you just name?
Sony.
Yeah. Why?
Mobile cameras.
Yeah. So camera is, you know, just roll yourself back. I mean, how, if you ask your father, I'm sure it was very difficult to buy a camera because very expensive. Okay, you can think whether 30 years back, 20 years back when you were born, how many photographs you had at that point in time. Very few you will find, because, you know, some uncle aunt used to have camera, they will come and click. All these things happen, right? But the world is changed now. Camera market is largely in mobile, and each and every person on the world is having a camera phone, right? So the whole market is changed because of this digital technologies. And of course, you're right, Sony is a company that supplies large number of cameras for mobile phones. Okay, all right. So now let's have say 5 minutes break, and then we will start again, right? Okay,
Sure, sir.
all right.
Sure, sir.